This is Channel 253. Beep, boop, boop.
On this episode of the Grit and Grain Podcast.
You know, we joke around all the time that, I'm not really sure how my, dumb Georgia-raised redneck ass got put in this place where I'm talking about world politics and commodities and how that affects the markets. But it's sort of true. I mean, that's sort of what we have to look at. Like, I just wanted to pour a beer behind a bar and hang out with my buds till 4 a.m. and here I am. Like, you ever look around, you're like, oh, I'm a serious person now. This is terrible. Right?
That's not been a problem for me.
Yeah, I did shave. Yeah.
Welcome to the Grit and Grain Podcast, where we explore and celebrate the craft beer industry, community, and history in Tacoma, Washington, and surrounding Pacific Northwest areas. Thank you so much for hanging out. Let's get to it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Grit and Grain Podcast, coming to you guys from the historic Parkway Tavern in Tacoma, Washington. My name is Matt McLaren. I'm here, as always, with Ron Swarner.
Hello.
Hello. That was rude. Sorry. That was so rude.
Especially after I fell off a ladder.
I don't know why I did that just now, but I'm super sorry. That's okay. Damn it. And Sean Jackson.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. I won't make fun of you for the way you said hello. How are you?
Fantastic.
Yeah?
All the things are pointing in the right direction. All points, yeah.
You want to just read the letter right now? Okay.
Yeah.
There's a reason why he's being apprehensive. Judy Graham writes, Ricky Wells was a breath of fresh air.
Is that nice, Judy?
It was nice to hear some of the science and skills taken to create beer instead of talk of erect nipples. Although I still think that was thrown in somewhere along the way during that episode.
I feel like we went nipple-free. I don't know.
But thanks for writing, Judy.
Yes. Thanks for caring about my anatomy.
I don't remember Nice Judy's last name, but I feel like it's Graham. And if she's the one who said that, I don't ever want to talk about nipples again because she's the sweetest person ever. She's the best. Anyway, we have an awesome guest today, which we'll get to that after all the nipple talk. But no, this dude actually has done a whole lot in the beer world, both in Tacoma and outside of Tacoma, but kind of in keeping with the theme of sort of highlighting the people who work behind like the raw ingredients. Just like we did with Ricky and hop stuff, we're going to talk about some nerdy grain shit today a little bit. So yeah, our guest today is Colin Harvin.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi, Colin.
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll get into nipple talk and this thing will turn into a dumpster fire real quick, but I appreciate you letting me
That's what we
in.
bank on every single week.
Yeah.
That's how we avoid sponsorships. Thanks, Channel 253. Before all that, though, what are you drinking, man?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm drinking the E9 Spirit House dry hopped lager, rice lager. It's delightful.
Good. I'm going to grab one of those on the break because it
so
sounds really good.
Yeah.
That's what I'm drinking.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. How is it?
Delicious.
Still good. Yeah. We got Sean.
Machine House, dark mild on cask, and
Yeah.
a little epic 2014 barley wine.
I almost grabbed some of that too, man. That's probably delicious.
Probably epic.
Yep.
I have some old school house because that's mostly what I'm drinking. If it's not some random lager. So yeah, dude, thanks for rolling down to do this, man.
For sure,
We're super
yeah.
pumped, and I don't know, like we all have probably a few questions, but if you want to tell people what you did in Tacoma, and I mean, like you've had a bunch of jobs kind of in the beer world, I would say.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's.
Can you tell the short story?
Totally. I mean, I realized the other day, you ever like do that thing where you look around. I remember when I was like young in my career and I was looking around at all the old guys and being like, look at these old guys. Like, get off your stool. Like, y'all, the times are changing, right? And now 15 years in, I'm starting to become that old guy, just ranting and like screaming at, the old man shakes fist at cloud kind of deal. But yeah, 15 years ago, I was out of the military and I went back to school at UGA to be an officer. And while I was there, I can't not work. So I started I was a bouncer at a craft beer and cocktail bar. Had my first craft beer which was Lagunitas IPA, and my head exploded. You know, and
Totally.
so forgive that old throwback. It was 2010 at that point, but it was phenomenal. And so
That beer was hot shit.
it was so good. I mean, I just didn't know beer could taste like that. And so from there, I worked my way up to managing that place, and I got my commission to be an officer, and I turned it down to go into the beer industry. And my battalion commander thought I was insane, but I did not want to be up at 4 a.m. I wanted to stay out till 4 a.m. So
Good policy.
So my ex and I actually moved out here. She said, "Where do you want to go?" Because she stayed in, and she said that JBLM was an option, and we wound up out here. And so essentially, I wound up running and managing a super tiny place, like out in like the Parkland area, and I beat down like several breweries' doors for a while. And I started at Wingman Brewing, and Wingman hired me to run their tasting room and do on-premise sales. And within 2 weeks, someone there, who will go unnamed, said, "I'm going on vacation and need you to double batch porter." And that's where I learned how to brew. It was trial by fire. So wound up being the assistant brewer and the R&D brewer there for a little bit and doing all that. Then worked for Seven Seas in Gig Harbor for a little bit. Moved over to 21st Amendment. And then wound up being the Southeast regional guy there. And from there, that's when I took the shift into raw ingredients and worked for a big company called the Country Malt Group, where some people might know them as a distributor. They're owned by the same people that have Great Western Malting, Canada Malting, Baird's Malt, that kind of thing. Okay. I worked several positions for them, but the last one I did was it was the regional sales manager for Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, and Nevada.
Goodness.
So I got a lot of windshield time, but it was a beautiful place. And they make some good beers out there, especially Utah. It's kind of wild, 3.2%, and they can do some pretty cool stuff with it. And then I got a phone call that Skagit was looking for somebody to do this dual role to sort of work and help them grow for the future. And so I'm the business development manager there. I don't know what that means. And I don't think they do either.
Nobody knows what it means. But it looks awesome on a business card.
It looks good. It looks good. So I've been doing that for 2 years, and I work with the operations team and the sales team and do a lot of stuff out in the industry with malt and craft malt and, all things malt. So
yeah.
Nice.
That's a good snapshot.
That's a great resume. Yeah.
When you were at
Sure is.
Wingman, was Dempster there?
no, Dempster came in right after I left, I think. So he was the brewer there, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that was right after. So it was just me, Kenny, and then a couple bartenders, Sarah Thompson and Becca Reed, I think.
Yep.
So that was it. We just kind of plugged away and had a great time there for that until going to work for the Mike Runyon. So
The Mike.
the Mike Runyon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and Rob Brunsman.
Yeah.
Which
You two guys were traveling around together, right?
Well, I gotta say, like, Ron's got more pictures of me. Like, if you Google my name, you'll see some pretty standard stuff. But if you go down like halfway through, there are multiple pictures of me for all the breweries that I work for, holding a beer, like passing it over to Ron. So that's kind of how I met Ron. He's every time he's like, "Hey, the picture," and I would just pose at every single brew festival. So yeah, that was that was pretty good. Yeah, I did Western Washington sales for them. It was where I went to Aberdeen for the first time, and man, let me tell you, what a place.
You hang underneath the bridge?
Yeah, only on the good days.
Yeah.
So yeah,
On the what?
the good days. Yeah, not all days are good days in Aberdeen, I think. So yeah, that was. Excuse my humor. Anyway,
Well, so, okay, you just mentioned craft malt, which I feel like is a term that like people don't think about a whole lot. But Alex Ganem, actually, who does Upright, makes incredible beer and is like, I believe the one who said like, can you really call it craft beer if you're not using craft malt? So it's like this, it's this kind of funny debate, especially among brewers, but just among like really hardcore nerds. Like, what is the difference between craft malt and non-craft malt?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a guild, the Craft Malt Guild. I'm the co-chair of the technical committee on the Craft Malt Guild, so I'm going to plug it. But you guys should go check it out. Just look up Craft Maltsters Guild. There's seals for the breweries, and some benefits to working with the craft malt companies. But I've worked for both, and so craft malt as a whole has been a very commoditized practice over the past 60, 70 years. When I say commoditized, I mean it's big, right? We think about where raw ingredients come from, whether that's wheat or meat or whatever. Malt sort of came because of its very nature and where it grows, in sort of the middle part of the country in the high dry deserts, right? It's a very large, wide scale deal, and when you do commoditize things like that, you're essentially feeding into a machine. And I don't rage against the machine. I can't believe I just said that. Oh, God. All right.
That was so casual.
This might be over. And now I really do sound old. But some people are very anti-commodity, but I think it's very important because I think to some extent, those big commoditized practices, they make sure to keep the cost of our raw ingredients low. They make sure we get 9,000 breweries in the country. We wouldn't be able to do that without these big machines. But when that happens, the focus tends to be on the production and just that, a production point of view. We sort of take away the, art of it, right? And you're just producing to make sure we're creating workhorses. A lot like I think some people look at some of the bigger companies, your AB InBevs, your Molson Coors, that kind of deal. It's sort of like that, but it's a little bit different because you have to have those to create. Craft malt sort of started and spun out roughly 10 years ago, and Skagit was sort of one of the first companies. And the idea behind it was to take out the commoditized practices and focus on a region. And then what Skagit sort of does, and a lot of the craft malt companies do, is they take a look at individual barley varietals. Mm-hmm. So if you take a look at barley, you're going to see, fields, golden fields. Everybody's seen it with the farmers, right? But what we don't really sort of understand is those varieties have been selected and bred to produce beer, and they have names, right? So we take a look at those barley varietals, and we use them and look at them as like wine grapes, right? So we have multiple different varietals that we use and grow, and each one of those has a different sort of flavor to it. And on top of that, we talk a lot about terroir, taste of place, right? And it's, Saisons and wild Saisons have always been my favorite beer because of that, right? The story behind it is beautiful, right? I mean, they finished harvesting, they brewed this beer, and then all the local fauna and flora came in and fermented, and that was truly a taste of place. You were getting ground, you're getting air, you're getting water, everything right there. And so this is sort of in the same vein of that, where we talk about the terroir and the taste of the land. And, the Skagit River Valley is a very unique place, and, we can get into that. I know I'm kind of off on a tangent. I will do that. But,
This is the best tangent ever. This is the nerdy shit I came here for, dude.
So, craft malt really takes a look at that terroir, that taste of place. It's small, it's more focused, it's more artisanal, for lack of a better word, while still being sort of a manufacturing process. Mm-hmm. And there are rules and regulations that state how to become a craft malt company. And every craft malting company has, different outlooks on how they do things. There's 3 in the state of Washington, since we are here. There's us, Link Malt. And then there's Mainstem Malt. Mainstem Malt, I guess, the best way to describe it is sort of in the same way. I don't think I can say Gypsy Brewer anymore, but I don't know what to call it.
Nomad.
Nomad Brewing. Okay,
Nomad.
Sorry. So pardon me.
I respect the awareness.
Yeah, I know. I just I don't know what to call it anymore. But the Stillwaters, right? The Brandstrom Keys, that that whole deal. And then there's Link Malt over in Eastern Washington as well, and they work a lot with Washington State University. Mm-hmm. And then there's us, and we work with Washington State University, but on this side of the Cascades, because as you can imagine, the growing conditions. East versus west of the Cascades are very, very, very different.
Yeah, totally.
So that's sort of in the nutshell. Craft is a lot smaller. They have, just like craft beer, there's outputs, there's ownership percentages that have to be maintained in order to keep that those specifications. And, we all work together to push that forward.
Nice. That was the best tangent ever.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask you one follow-up question.
No, I'm good. I've got another 20 minutes to talk, so you just need to tell me that, right?
Before your diaper's full?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, man. It's getting there. So.
You mentioned Link Malt. And so like I see a lot more breweries, especially the ones over in Spokane, and we're close to those guys. Like we work with Lumberbeard, and they like have started printing on the can, like using Link Malt Pilsner or Link Malt like Heritage Czech. Same with Mecca Grade. Varietal focuses a lot on using Mecca Grade, and a lot of people list Skagit Valley Malt on like their actual sell sheets or their selling points. Do you feel like the consumer perception of like what craft malt is now is starting to kind of evolve, and it's affecting people's buying decisions when they're looking at names like that on a can or on like a sell sheet?
Yeah.
Like people are starting to choose it because there's specific malt companies behind it.
Yeah. So, you know, there's me, the Skagit Valley Malting employee answer, and then there's Colin Harvin, the 15-year beer veteran guy that kind of knows. And so because Eric Bice, who's our marketing director, my counterpart, and really, really great guy, he would kill me if I didn't say yes, that is, you know, the truth. But the truth really is that I think it depends a lot on the consumer. And I think one of the things that I think is easy to sort of relate it to is organic, right? I think the organic certifications means something to a very specific kind of consumer, right? And I do think that is becoming more and more important to that consumer base and other consumer bases. And I would say that after the big agricultural event and weather event that we had 2-3 years ago, those of you who are brewers know that the cost of your raw ingredients went insane due to a heat dome that passed over the Cascades and then moved into the largest barley growing region in the world, spiking proteins, for like killing out a bunch of barley and doing that. So a lot of what's happening now is people like to take a look at, you know, what the regenerative agricultural practices are, how those work, and that is starting to push some of those consumer bases forward. Part of the thing with the guild that we do is we are trying to push that, you know, more and more, you know, towards a place where your consumer does care. It's unfortunate because malt is nowhere near as sexy as hops are. And we know that, right?
That is unfortunate.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. And we're, you know, Washington hops are king. And I'm friends with a lot of folks at YCH and love those guys and love like what they've done. But man, that consumer drove it. I mean, you know, the sheer amount of Citra Mosaic and Simcoe and, you know, just the people talk about it. I mean, how many, you know, besides you see Maris Otter occasionally on a can, right? You see Golden Promise maybe, but you know, how many Citra puns have you seen on a can, right? Like sit your ass down, like, you know, so it's I think, you know, it's starting to become more and more
beer name, I call it.
Important. Yeah. So, and I think, you know, that's ultimately what, you know, we're trying to get that awareness out there to the consumer. And ultimately, Sean can tell you, I'm waiting for barley wines to just become the style of styles. And when that happens, we'll have a whole lot more to talk about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have a funny story. Well, not a funny story, but on that note, I got to go to hop school 10 or 12 years ago. And it was right when, you know, getting Citra and Simcoe and acquiring hop contracts was very difficult, and a lot of smaller breweries were having a hard time. I feel like a lot of the folks that ended up at hop school were frustrated because they weren't getting these hops to use because they just weren't grown in an amount where everyone could have them.
Yeah.
So there was this seminar, and it was one of the hop union representatives had gone up and talked about their growing practices and like what they're planning to do for the future. And people were just getting up and like getting pissed and like all these questions, right? So it was this very intense, fiery hop talk. And then the next person up was from Country Malt.
Yeah.
And very Ben Steinish.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he gets up and starts his presentation, and everyone pretty much goes and gets beer out of the cooler, and like it's me and like 3 other people still listening to this guy. But he's sitting there and breaking it down. He's like, you know, you produce this amount of malt in our country in Canada. And he's like, a certain portion of it has to go for cereal grain.
Yeah.
Like you can't just make as much beer out of the grains we grow as you want.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. So he's sitting there and he's got his little pie chart and breaking down how much is left for the brewing industry.
He's my kind of guy. I think I know who this
So
is
sexy.
too. Yeah.
And, and he's sitting there and he's still telling people, because malt contracts for smaller breweries wasn't a thing. And he's sitting there telling them, he's like, y'all really need to start thinking about malt contracts the way the industry is growing. And, and I thought it was fascinating, but it completely fell on deaf ears.
It did. And so it's agriculture. It's agriculture, commodities. If you trace the supply chain back, and that's the joke I always make, right? Is that I fell in love with beer and I traced the supply chain all the way back till I hit the ground, right? I hit the soil, and that's what it is. And so
I like that.
we grain to glass sort of supply chain management is sort of what we're looking at now in terms of the larger picture of how brewers are dealing with things like contracting and malts and hops, right? And so the industry, I mean, it should be no surprise to anybody that the industry rapidly exploded. I mean, exponentially. From the time I started, there were 1,200 breweries to now 9,000. I go to CBC now, and I don't know anybody else that goes in this room, but if you do, I don't see anybody I know anymore because it's just so overly crowded. And because of that, we have a finite number of, sort of raw materials. And when there is a year like 2 years ago with the heat dome, that creates this, I mean, it's simple supply and demand, right? That creates the shortage. The thing about, barley in the U.S. So I'm pretty sure this is correct, but the North America is the largest or second largest growing barley region in the world. And the majority of that is in Canada. In Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, all those prairie folk, like my friend Heather Jared, great prairie people, and they grow. I mean, so much of it, a ridiculous amount of it, right? They throw it on tanker ships, and goes out to all sorts of places. I think Australia might be the other place where it's the most. And the U.S. does have a relatively sizable growing region, but nowhere near like it is in Canada. So when you look at country malt, you look at places like Great Western Malting, to put some things into perspective, there's only about 5 portions of states that we really grow barley at a commodity level in the U.S. And that's Montana, which is primarily growers for Malt Europe. You have Idaho, which is a lot of Great Western, also Molson Coors and Anheuser-Busch. They grow barley there because they've got their, I mean, just like hops, they've got their own barley strains that they use. A little bit in Wyoming, Eastern Washington, and Eastern Oregon. That's a little bit in California, but those are primarily the big states that do that. So from a perspective of, it's a very small chunk of the pie. But since it's a commodity system, right, whatever that global output is, right, that sort of controls how much there is and what that cost looks like at the end of the year, right? And so I think it's brewers are a lot more honed in, I think, this year on where those raw ingredients are. And I will tell you, I was laughing, Sean, when you tell me, because there's Spencer Tucke-Myers over at Yakima YCH now, formerly Hop Union, and laughing hearing the Hop Union guys getting yelled at is so funny, because he and I just had lunch, and he took me to task for the fact that when the malt industry had to raise all their pricing, no brewer batted an eye. But the second the hop companies do it, oh boy, they are ready with pitchforks.
It's already the most expensive thing.
It is. It's pretty wild. So, and I think it's because the way it's commoditized is a little bit different. But you're seeing a lot more malt contracts. You're seeing people, and I worry a little bit about the brewing industry this year because we had COVID and then we had the supply chain issues. And there ain't no PPP loans for supply chain issues, right? That's just business management.
Yeah.
So it's been a very, very interesting year to sort of watch what those supply chains are going to do, and we're still not recovered from a barley commodity level from that year. So we don't have the same stores. There used to be all these grain elevators in Canada that just had tons and tons and tons of barley. They don't have as much as they used to. If you pair that with Russia invading Ukraine, I mean, that's the world's breadbasket, right? So those two things happening simultaneously, I mean, it took raw ingredient prices and raised them, several 100%, an unheard of amount in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
You start pairing all these world events that are going on with like Brexit and, what that does to transportation and shipping. The fact that, Germany, because everybody loves Weyermann malt, right? Well, everybody loves Weyermann. I say that with a little bit of...
Oh, we heard it.
Yeah.
We heard it. Loud and clear, Colin.
Just never worked for a company that sold Weyermann, and one day I'd like to not have to sell against them, but they do make great malt. But, their kilns are operated with natural gas that come from where? Russia, right? So what does that do? That also increases, right? So you start really watching this, and it's not anything, I joke with RJ all the time. Sorry, Bobby J. Alder, good friend of mine.
The R stands for
Works
Bobby?
directly for Mr. King Grossman. But, we joke around all the time that, I'm not really sure how my, dumb Georgia-raised redneck ass got put in this place where I'm talking about world politics and commodities and how that affects the markets, but it's sort of true. I mean, that's sort of what we have to look at. Like, I just wanted to pour beer behind a bar and hang out with my buds till 4 a.m, and here I am. Like you ever look around, you're like, oh, I'm a serious person now. This is terrible. Right?
That's not been a
even
problem
shaved.
for me.
I did shave. Yeah. I kept doing it too. That's what scares me a little bit.
So the two things I hear most about Skagit is incredible charity contributions, and B, the tour is amazing.
Yeah. Yes.
I hear that all the time.
The tour is it's great, and I would invite everybody here to come up.
Yes.
If you are a professional brewer, please reach out to us and we will take you on a tour. If you are a home brewer, I think we're going to do 1 day a year for you guys because some of y'all don't work and we can't take y'all around the time.
There's a couple in the house.
Yeah, sorry. I sold to y'all for years at Brewcraft and Country Malt Groups. I still have PTSD from that. But the tour's great. If we are able, our CEO, Dave Green, he will perform the tour. It's really, really cool. Like, we all kind of go out and do it and do the backstory. You sort of see, hearing the story about how it started because, barley in Skagit, you talk about the 5 states that are there. The Skagit region only has, 88,000 acres of land, right? Which is nothing because there's millions and millions and millions of acres in the U.S. that grow and Canada that grow barley, and we have such a small percentage of it that can grow that barley. And so the farmers up there were growing barley for cover crops, and we're going to get into ag real quick. So brace yourselves, because my mother. Because all my cousins are like they breed show cattle and stuff, right? And I was the I was the like tattooed hipster kid that ran off to Athens and did whatever. And my mom and my dad are floored when I go home and start talking ag with my cousins. It's
I was gonna say,
weird. Yeah, it's pretty surreal. But
stepped your foot right back into it.
It's just like it's full circle. What is like. Ben Folds says, like, you can't escape your redneck past, right? It's always looking at your heels.
Ben Folds says that?
Yeah, it's good. 'Cause he's from North Carolina. But anyway.
The first Ben Folds reference.
So agriculturally, barley and wheat are used as cover crops, and primarily for potatoes, and that's why Idaho grows a lot, because what happens is that potatoes are really, really hard on the soil, right? It's all about soil health. So you're talking, you need these, dense pockets of nutrients inside the soil to really, grow those potatoes, right? And so barley's grown, and there's a feed market for barley, and it usually is the world feed market's done with like corn and all that other stuff that you're used to hearing about. But they grow barley because it returns so much carbon and so much nutrients back into the soil that it's really great for potatoes and other crops. So the farmers, they were just growing it, right? But they wanted more money, right? Because that's what capitalism moves the needle, right? So, they wanted more money, and what they found is that, malting quality barley, right? That drives the highest price. So if they can grow to that quality and we have a buyer, right, they can make more money off of it. And that's how the whole thing started. So you had a couple farmers there, meet up with a guy named Wayne Carpenter and then Westland Distilling. All three of them sort of chance met at this thing called the Kneading Conference, which is hilarious because it's KNEADING and it's about bread and wheat. And they were like, awesome. Weston was like, we're going to start a malt house up. And Wayne was like, well, that's weird. We're starting a malt house. And the farmers are like, we want a malt house. And it was like sort of that, the Spider-Man pointing, like, oh, we're all going to do the thing, right? And so they did, right? And so they, they wind up building this machine out of the place that they bought parts from the place that you buy high quality malt equipment, and that's Home Depot. And they went and they bought this proof of concept, and they built it in Wayne's garage. And like, I haven't seen it, and like they're like ashamed of it or something, but I'm really pumped because I want to throw it in like a, museum. And they proved the concept, and so they shopped it around to see sort of, how the bigger commodity companies felt like, that. And, they went up to some of them and said, hey, we want to, do malt, make malt for you guys, or how do you want to do it? And they're like, what the hell is a Skagit? I don't know what a Skagit is. So So they were like, fine, cool, we'll just do this thing. And so they built a pilot machine, and then it sort of slowly grew. That we have a company that's based, my closest coworker is a great guy named Bill Redding. And Bill and I on paper should not be friends, but he and I have a really great working relationship. He's 67 years old and has never had a drop of beer in his life. And we are thick as thieves. And he's an engineer, and he designed this really cool machine. And so we have the only malt machines in the world that do all three of the processes of malting in one.
Know that?
So for our listeners out there, the three processes of malting.
You're so good at this, Colin.
That's my Michael Barbaro impression. Anyway, they're steeping, germination, and kilning. So the malting process is we're essentially making grass grow. That's really what you're doing. And so you pull in all the stuff from harvest, right? All your malt comes from harvest, and we store it in these big grain silos, and we clean it, pull it out, and then we're ready to malt it. So the machines do all three in once. In a typical commodity system, usually there's 3 different vessels that do 3 different things. So we've got these giant steep tanks, and they flush water. That's what they do at the big levels. They flush water and drain water and flush water and drain water and flush water and drain water. It's very, 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 it's not very environmentally friendly. It's not very sustainable. And so once the barley kernels feel all that water kind of flushing in, they think, oh, it's raining outside. It's time for us to grow, right? To pass that on. And so what happens is it tricks into germination, which is the second phase. And so that germination phase, you're essentially tricking this thing called the agrospire to sort of work its way all the way through the barley kernel. It's going to take, protein matrices and starch matrices and turn it down to fermentable sugar, which we all know that the yeast need, right? And so that sort of moves through. And once that agrospire gets to the very end, that's what a good maltster's job is, to know right when that happens, and they cut it off and they switch it into kilning. And so kilning is when you push lots and lots and lots and lots of air, hot air or certain temperature air, depending on what you're trying to make. And that determines what flavors we get, right? So if you have a Pilsner, right, lower color, right, we're going to keep a little bit lower temp, and we're going to do it for a shorter amount of time to get that, right? And then if you want a pale, you're going to do a little bit warmer, a little bit longer. There's these things called stew times, but essentially it's all the Maillard reaction. You guys can all Google that. If you're cooks, you know what that is. And that determines, sort of what those flavor profiles are, right? And so these machines do all three in one. And when I came, my jaw was on the floor, like seeing the whole thing. I was like, this shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing. And it's cool too, because there's a big regenerative agriculture and sustainability focus at Skagit, which was proved a couple years ago, which is great. And that, these machines use 1/3 of the inputs that the bigger companies are, able to.
That's awesome.
So it's very, very environmentally friendly. It's very, very sustainable. And it, it's really cool because it is built like, they are built by these engineers. There's a quote from this guy named Bruce French, who worked at Canada Malting, and he comes in and consults with us every once in a while. And like when he first saw the machines and was messing around with it, it's so much more advanced than a traditional malt company or malting facility. And he was like, it is like you've given the keys to a Lamborghini to a toddler, because they are so complex, and it's really, it's a really, really cool thing. So, we do all those things there. We primarily do base malts, lots and lots of base malts, treating each barley varietal like a wine grape, and then we do some specialty as well. We don't have roasters, so we're the only people in the country that I think do a traditional caramel malt. And a caramel malt traditionally is actually brought through the malting process, and then we hit the kiln up and caramelize it. Most caramel malts we see are actually crystal malts, which are done in big roasting bins, and those things are not malted at all. It's just sent through, it's liquefied center, and then pushed all the way through. There's benefits for each, and they're really, really cool, but it was one of the first places I've seen that does that. And we mess around, we do some experimental stuff, we're the only people in the country that do traditional peating for peated malt that you'd get in primarily Scotch, but also Scotch ales, wee heavies, things like that. So,
which we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
We have to take a quick break, but I am overstimulated right now.
Sorry?
In what region of your body?
Yeah.
In my brain region.
Okay.
Well, I'm the one sitting closest to Sean's, and I can see his nipples.
Do you have a patent on those machines?
No, you can't ask that because we have to take a break. I'm sorry.
Yes.
You can ask it when we're back.
Yes. And I'm a corporate espionage. If somebody wants to pay me money, I'm selling out. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
So stick around for that. We'll be right back. Thank you guys for hanging out. As we usually do, I want to give a quick shout out to Channel 253. Doug, our wonderful producer, is from Channel 253 and makes us sound so clean and professional every single week. Doug and his team at Channel 253 host a wonderful network of podcasts that are all hosted and produced by local community members and community leaders. And it's all about Tacoma, like as a city, as a community, what's going on in town, what food is good, what the local politics are, and like a lot of other local issues. If you want to stay connected to Tacoma and follow what's going on in and outside of the town, then please go support those guys. Check out their podcast. You can support them directly by going to channel253.com/membership and following all of their awesome podcasts.
And I just want to jump in as somebody that lived in Tacoma and had to move away from Tacoma. I miss this place and all of the things it has to offer. So just go to Channel 253,
Word.
find all the things and cherish it for me because that's incredible.
Speaking of cherishing things in Tacoma, Ron has some events going on in the
Yep.
next week or so.
So Incline Cider House has a new cider. It's called the Tropics, and they're debuting it all weekend. Silver City, they're doing $1 for every pint sold for the Kitsap Humane Society the Saturday from 3 to 7. Cider and Cedar is reopening, so they've moved.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of trees in there from the photos, a lot of cedar, and they're officially opening Saturday.
Yeah.
And then at Peaks and Pints on Tuesday, where everybody's brewing from White Salmon is doing a rebranding and has new beers. We're going to do the release party, and then Doug's going to sit in on this podcast next week. So pretty excited about that.
What a shameless plug, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Yep, you bet.
Yeah, if you guys have not yet, you should check out Cider and Cedar when it opens because it is a beautiful spot to grab a drink. Even if you're not a big cider head, they are going to serve a little bit of beer now that they have a new, bigger tap list. But yeah, thank you. I can't wait for Doug. Cannot wait for Doug.
Yeah.
So before we took a break, we were talking a little bit about some peated malt, and there's definitely not any whiskey in front of us right now. But Colin did bring an empty box that this cool whiskey would be in. Yeah, I nailed it.
Yeah,
I nailed it. I nailed it.
You did good. That was subtle. So I in the break. What's the producer's name again? I'm sorry. Doug. So Doug sort of made this comment because I'm going to talk about peat, but I kind of want to talk about this is like all the science sort of behind this and how rapidly it's taken off over the past. And it was such a good comment because it's something that like I'm realizing on a day-to-day basis. And one of my things as like a business development manager that I realize now is that I just like call people. And I try to figure out things that we don't know, right? So I've been on the phone with like UC Davis and their whole brewing school, and I talked to Dr. Harmony Bettenheisen in Hartwick College, and Pat Hayes, who is a rock star in the barley breeding world. Dr. Pat Hayes is real nice. He's everybody's barley's grandpa. He's awesome. But, peating, because we're talking about peating. Peating is one of those things that's so shrouded in mystery, right? It's so... The Scots have this whole deal, and they haven't really talked about it. So those who are not familiar with what peat is a organic substance that grows in primarily bogs and fens, which I did not know what a fen was, but it's kind of like a bog, but the ionization is different. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Traditionally, when you have peated products and peat in general, most people may be familiar with the peat that occurs in Scotch whiskey, particularly Islay whiskeys. So your Ardbegs, your Lagavulins, my favorite, and your Lafroigs, which Lafroig has one of the best tasting notes, as we were making fun of earlier, which is hospital fire. Is a nice tasting note because you get these Band-Aid and iodine flavors out of there because it's very moss oriented. Well, peat bogs are sort of all over the place. You can Google, and there's a peat bog down in Shelton, Washington, and that is where we receive our peat from. And peat in the U.S. is primarily used to soak up hazardous waste. It takes on 1,000% of its weight in moisture.
Right.
So they put it on. It's very, very important. They use it in the military. They use it, on road spills and things like that. It's a very, very different thing. To the point that when we called the guy, because Matt Hoffman from Westland wanted to make peated whiskey and use peat, he did what you do and he Googled it. That was the peat place. And he called the guy and he's like, "Hey, we want to buy some peat from you." And he goes, "For what?" And he goes, "We want to make whiskey out of it." And he was like, "What?" And apparently I found out last night that they didn't even want to charge Westland and us for the first couple of years for making it because we were using so little of it. But anyway, kind of moving to the forward, we started harvesting this peat and we started traditionally peating. So there's a lot of, this is where it gets into the science versus who knows what, right? And there's a lot of debate over what traditional peating is versus, not. So traditionally, peat was used as a heat source in the Islay region. So we talked about those stages of malting, and you've got steeping, germing, and then kilning. How they would get the malt to go from germing to kilning is they'd start burning peat moss, and that's where that smokiness originally came from. Now, it's unclear at this point if the companies still do that in the bigger, larger Scottish and UK companies still do that, but we choose to do it in that same fashion. So once germination is almost done, we switch in and we start pumping this peat inside the machines to actually peat it's called peated malt, right? It's not peat smoked.
Right.
It's not after the fact, it's peated malt. And so that is, we're the only company in America doing it at this scale, and there's an argument internally at work on if it's at all or not. So my marketing guy will kill me if I say we're the only people doing it. That's not true. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so the
Sounds like there might be some meetings after this podcast.
Yeah, I know. Dude,
Like people listen.
Yeah.
It's Ron saying good luck.
I know, right? Anyway, now I'm all sidetracked thinking about my inevitable demise. But no, so the cool thing about the peat that's grown in Shelton, Washington is it's an entirely different species of peat, right? It's not moss oriented because there's all these like super old dead organisms that live there, right? And so, the peat that's done here is it throws off entirely different flavor profiles than you get from the Isleys, the hospital fires, right? Band-Aid iodine, right? So here what we get is these fruity characteristics. We hear prosciutto wrapped melon, smoked peaches, things like that as it goes.
Smoked peaches is on point.
Smoked peaches on point.
On point.
So what the empty box that we have in front of us is Westland Solum. So Westland Distilling is in Soto in Seattle. They are the largest maker of American single malt whiskey in the U.S., and they're leading the charge to get a legal definition for it, just like craft beer and all that other stuff. So for the while, they were making peated whiskeys, and those peated whiskeys were made with entirely UK malt. But once we started to produce, this is the first time ever. They will be releasing it here in a couple days, so this is not actually out yet, but it will be by the time this airs. I don't know. Awesome, perfect. Yep. Yeah, so this will be aired out and good to go. So this is Westland Solum. It uses 100% Northwest peat and peated malt, right? So they basically threw this in several different barrels. From what I understand, there was an ex-bourbon barrel that they used, also some additional cooperage reserve barrels that they used. So, they'll kill me if I get it wrong, but it's either high char, low toast, or high toast, low char. So that way I cover them both.
That sounds probably more
to
accurate.
age it out, and then
high toast, low char.
and then they blend it out, and it is absolutely phenomenal. They did a sort of private event last night where we got to taste it and walk through it and sit through it, and I'm very, very, very pleased with the way that it turned out. And it's really cool. We talked about beer and terroir. This is the same thing. This is a taste of Washington. It's a taste of America, right? Your first ever American single malt
Fuck yeah.
whiskey. It's cool. Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
So that is what I have brought an empty vessel for.
For anybody following along, Single Hill has a wonderful partnership with Westland and puts a lot of their incredible imperial stouts in their previously used barrels. And I cannot fucking wait for the stout that comes out of this barrel.
It's great. I mean, the rack houses now have moved up. If you come for a tour, all their rack houses have moved to Skagit, and we can see them and go through there. And one day we went on a tour, and they had a barrel thief, and we pulled a bunch of stuff out of Pedro Jimenez sherry casks and Madeira casks.
Dang,
and anybody that
dude.
knows me knows I love both of those things. Just give me that sweet, sweet dessert wine.
Fortified goodness, man.
God, that
Ugh.
barley wine and some diabetes. Ooh, baby.
Yeah.
All about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can't take the boy out of Georgia.
So yeah, sure. 47th in education. It's gone up. It's gone up now because Hollywood's come to town, but still.
Hey. Oh, fuck.
Sorry. It was a great plug for. Well, we're huge in Georgia, so it used to be.
That's Sean's actually not joking. We know that we have listeners in Atlanta, actually. We see you guys.
Oh, how did you say it?
Atlanta?
No, Atlanta. There's no T.
Oh.
Yeah.
There definitely is one.
Just-
but I won't say it anymore.
Not if you're from there. So I'm trying to get you street cred.
That's all right.
So
I
we
do
all-
say Appalachia.
Yeah. What's that? Oregon and Washington.
Washington. Yeah.
But to all the Atlanta listeners, I'll see you guys at the Claremont Lounge. I know what that means.
Yeah, we actually have a weird, it's like Seattle, Tacoma, New York, and then Atlanta. So we appreciate you guys.
Wait, Ron had an eyebrow raise, and I'm interested.
You did go for it.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask you, what's your favorite part of the job?
Ooh.
Besides all the nerdy stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah.
No, that's it. I mean, that's it, right? Is that I had this realization, I wander around and you start drinking beer, right? And you drink a lot of beer. Everybody here drinks a lot of beer, and I drink a lot of beer. And you kind of realize at some point that I'm not going to say the magic is gone, right? But it's sort of like, you're like, oh, I get it. I see what they're doing. I get this. This is the take on it, right? And then I got hungry to learn more. And so my favorite part of my job is how much I have learned and how much I am learning. Getting to deal with farmers and agriculture is so rad. Working with barley breeding programs to sort of learn how that entire process works. Like, we're shaping sort of, these things that it may take 9 years for these new barley varietals to come out and things like that. It's a lot like the way that Citra and Mosaic and all those HB blah, 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 right, that come out from YCH, they take long
People
periods
who
of
heard
time.
Ricky's episode a couple weeks ago will
Yeah,
sound
right,
familiar because
yeah.
it's roughly the same timeline for a hop.
Yeah, it is. It's about 9 years, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of all agriculture to get it moved up to a point where it's commercially viable. But learning these things, how they work, how they don't work, and that's everything from the science behind it to the economics behind it. I mean, at Skagit, one of the things that I really like is we have this discussion that it has to work for 3 people, right? It has to work for the growers first and foremost. If it doesn't yield well, then why are they growing it? They don't want to grow that. It doesn't make any sense for them financially. And the next thing, actually, let me stop on the grower thing, because one of the things that I want to point out about growers that really blew my mind when I started working in this industry and learning about all this is you think about, you go to work, right, every day, right? And some people have, I've stared at Excel spreadsheets and love that all day and talk to customers, and that's great. Sean, how many beers have you poured at how many beers? Do you know? Like, if you had to guess, like how many hundreds of thousands?
Yeah. I don't know. I might be in the Million Mile Club.
Right, in a Million Mile Club, right? And so, that's our miles driven or whatever. When you think about a farmer, right? John Rusin is one of our farmers, and he is Rusengard Farms. He is I think the largest tulip producer in the U.S. and the second largest in the world, behind somebody in like Holland. John Rusin's in his 60s, and he has had 40 attempts in his life to grow tulips. That's wild to me to think about. It's an annual thing. So whereas we pour millions of beer, or we stare over stuff.
I have so many questions.
I know it's such, when you put it into perspective, like it's kind of nuts, right? So like he's had 40 attempts to grow tulips in his life, and it's all this combined knowledge. So, and then the next 2 people, because I know he said 3 people, the other 2 people that we have to work on is we work about the farmers, we worry about, the maltster, right? We have to be able to malt it. And then finally we worry about the the brewer and the distiller, right? And my favorite part of the job is watching and learning how to get all three things of those in synchronicity, right? In synergy, not in a corporate way, to work together to do that. So that's my favorite part of the job. Yeah.
Synergistically is like my least favorite word.
I'm sorry. I know.
But it makes sense when you say it just now.
It's Matt Hoffman's fault because he said it last night. Now it's been stuck in my head all day.
So, the correlation to hops, malt selection.
We do okay, so this is really cool. So anybody that's been out into the hop fields and has been to hop and brew school knows that like you can go out and you go to the experimental fields and see that, right? Mm-hmm. We have that. So with the barley breeding program right there, we wind up taking everybody out. We have this thing called the Barley Bonanza. And it's in July for customers and people in the industry that would like to go. And we barbecue pigs. Absolutely. You guys please come out. It's great. It's a great time. Up in Skagit, we have beers. I think we did 8 pork butts last year. And we bring everybody out. We load up and we all go check out these experimental fields. So the experimental fields show little 3 by 3 plots, right? Of not inches, 3 feet or 3 meters or something. I don't know. It's big. Of all these different experimental barleys, and it is a truly mind-blowing sort of thing to take a look at because everybody's used to the golden fields and all that other stuff. But barley grows all sorts of different ways. Like it hangs over. There's colored barley that's like purple. It's not water soluble, so it wouldn't affect your beers. They have like awns. Which are the little like prickly things that hang off. We actually have to take we have to remove the awns in the process of cleaning them, and so we move that through an on-offer. So Dave would be mad at me if I didn't say that. And so there's all this sort of thing where you can go out and see, and we're working with Washington State University's Bread Lab and Barley Breeding program to actually start breeding and working on our own different barley varietals that are synonymous with Skagit. Nice. And it's kind of cool because then you really do get a selection, and the people that are joining us early on are going to get to sort of shape how those wind up.
It's fucking sweet, dude.
Yeah.
I could do this for another 2 hours, but we have to tell fuck up stories.
What?
Yeah.
Is that?
I don't have to tell fuck up stories. I feel like I've done my part. However, have you ever participated in a story that would be fucked up in nature?
Yes.
Good.
I got 2, but I might get fired if I tell one. So I got to tell the other one. I'll tell the other one. We're not rolling. But I want to tell a story about a little guy in the beer industry named Rob Brunsman.
Yeah.
Rob Brunsman, when I first started at Seven Seas, was the guy that was in charge who taught me all I needed. We used to drive around and do all sorts of stuff. And so, since this is a Tacoma-centric podcast, there's some people in here that I'm going to name drop. I will not change the names of the story to protect the innocent because none of you knows it. So I'm learning. I'm green, right? I'm real green. I'd move over to Seven Seas. I think I'd been there about 2 or 3 months, and I'm learning the beer night, right? And every rep who listens to this knows the beer night. You go, you put on the show, you do the thing right. And so Marine View Beverage at the time had planned this beer night with us at a bar that was, I think it was just the dock or dockside or something down there, still there. Yep. And so I'm learning, and Mr. Pete Gisty and Kent Wetzler are there, if you know those two gentlemen. And, Kent and I kind of hit it off right away, redneck pasts and whatnot. And Kent, is like, hey, how you liking it? He's like, it's good, it's good. And he's like, yeah. I was like, I'm learning a lot from Rob, really, starting to look up to him. Kent goes, oh, okay, all right. He's like, you want to see something? And I was like, yeah. He's like, you drink whiskey? And I was like, oh, I drink whiskey. And so he brought out whiskey. And if you've ever met Mr. Brunsman does not do well on the brown liquors. And the fuck up came when we just kept going, and anybody that knows me knows I'm a little bit of an instigator. I like to stir the shit and just watch it go and poke and get people, I like for people to have a good time. Well, Rob had a real good time to the point that we had to call my now ex-wife. And Rob, I had to literally pick him up, and I threw him in the back of a 2-door Toyota Yaris. where she drove us back to my house, where I once again carried him like a baby, or like what officer and a gentleman, right? Just like scooped up in.
That's a better visual.
And I threw him in my guest bedroom. And I was like, what do I do? She's like, you should probably call his wife. And I was like, that's a good idea. So I called his wife. I was like, hey, Rob's 90-night time. He's not going to come back. And then I let him sleep. And the next morning I came in, and Rob Brunsman, I had to throw away that mattress from where you wet the bed. And I'm never forgiven you for that. And Rob, what you said to me when I said, Rob, did you wet the bed? And you said, yeah, it's just a little bit. And I was like, no, Rob, a little bit is too much. Any amount is too much. So that was a pretty good fuck-up story.
Just a little bit.
Was that a good sorry, Rob? But yeah.
That's my favorite story that I've ever heard.
Was that am I good?
I mean,
That was fucking perfect.
The other involves me and a current coworker almost getting arrested at the border of Canada, but I will not go into that.
That's
why?
fine. For part two. God
damn it.
When I leave this organization, I'll come back and tell that story.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're
that
welcome.
was freaking great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Is that over?
One more thing.
Oh, no.
Brace yourself.
What, do you have my ex-wife on there? Or is she writing an email to you? That's good.
All right, grit and grainers, get ready for more malt science. Email us at cheers@gritandgrainpodcast.com with your comments, opinions, and any photos of the malted milk ball crime fighter Whopper Texas Ranger would be appreciated. We read and drink everything we receive, and we try to respond as quickly as we can. If not online, then on air. You can subscribe to Grit and Grain on Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher, and please leave us a review. Also, check us out on channel 253, Doug! Woo! And gritandgrainpodcast.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for episode notes, beer news, and occasional revisits to the Grit and Grain podcast evolution when grains meant malt of a different color, such as our chocolate malt shake phase, where fuck-up stories focus more on breakage of wooden slab spoons on ungiving chocolate malt services. Also, our next podcast iteration was when Grit and Grain visited less aggressive country and western, loud-talking, rolling rock drinking, styled gel wearing, American Eagle shopping, snowmobile crashing, Old Spice dousing, you the man shouting, must-see TV watching, mini truck driving bars, and we reviewed their gritty malt liquors with such names as High Plains Ski Ball, a man called My Little Pony, and a fistful of personality from the gift shop next door to the Planet Hollywood. If this podcast is not what you expected, please alter your expectations. Actually, our favorite malt flavor is Ben & Jerry's Sweaty Balls ice cream, complete with fudge-covered rum and milk chocolate malt balls filled with the essence of Alec Baldwin. No such thing as a bad time to visit Tacoma. No such thing as too much barley wine.
Yeah!
Tune in next Friday for more sweet chatter. Cheers.
Cheers.
Damn, Ron.
Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us at Grit and Grain Podcast wherever you get your social media and catch new episodes every Friday. Cheers.
Good up.
This is channel 253.